introduction. I'm Michael Hoffman. I'm also a student here, as well as a co-founder of Iraq Veterans Against the War. Beyond that, I'm a combat veteran. I served with the U.S. Marines in active duty for a little over 4 years, including just over 5 years ago when I crossed the border into Iraq as part of the initial invasion. I want to talk first about why we should leave, and then also about how we should leave. I think why we should leave is it's some of the most basic things out there. Looking at what's going on in Iraq, they can't seem to get themselves together. We see that time and time in the news that they can't seem to coalesce. And my opinion is that the leading reason is the American occupation itself. This occupation is delegitimizing whatever government the Iraqis put in power as long as the American military is there. No matter what side of the force, as long as there is a military presence within Iraq from some other nation, that leads to the impression that the real power behind the throne is the foreign military, not the people of Iraq. And I disagree with some of the things the last speaker said that, or not disagree, but I think in terms of time is the big question here. Right now we're gearing up for the big election cycle. That's the big news everywhere, and I hate to break it, but in my opinion, none of our current candidates are talking real withdrawal. Flat out. Not McCain, not Obama, not Clinton. When I talk about withdrawal, I'm talking about stepping into office and saying, as of this day, we're ending combat operations and we're bringing our troops home. That's what I talk about when I say withdrawal. I don't mean timelines of over a year or several years, as some of them say, or God forbid, a century. As someone who participated in the initial invasion of Iraq and was part of those 100,000 plus troops who surged into that country 5 years ago, I can tell you honestly that if we decide we are leaving, we can have every single combat troop out of that country within 6 months. Flat out. Not months, not years, 6 months. Period. But I'm also not talking about abandoning the people of Iraq. That would be the absolute worst thing that we can do right now. I do fully believe in the idea of political reconciliation. That's one of the cornerstones of Iraq Veterans Against the War. We have 3 main goals: ending the occupation, getting the support and the benefits our own veterans need when they return home, as well as reconciliation to the people of Iraq for the damage this war has done. And I'm talking about real reconciliation, not reconciliation through American contractors and American corporations making more and more money off of this. I'm talking about real aid to the people of Iraq. It's going to hurt. It's going to hurt us. I know that. But on the same token, it can help us as well. If you look at history and you look at what happened with rebuilding Europe after World War II, that really helped fuel the U.S. economy. Because after World War II, Europe didn't have the abilities and the factories and the people and the manpower to make the heavy equipment, to create the things they needed to help rebuild their country, so they turned to us. And I think the U.S. as well as other countries can really help Iraq in that fashion. Another thing I think is important to remember is to put into, just to really look at what effect Iraq's neighbors have to what's going on in there right now. We hear a lot of people talk about bringing other Middle Eastern countries in to help control the borders, keep Iraq safe, find a political solution. I really disagree with that idea. If you look at Middle Eastern politics and see who Iraq's neighbors are, none of them are going to have Iraq's best interest at heart. Historically, Iraq has been a major problem for all of those countries, and they're going to want a weak Iraq who answers to other countries and not the people of Iraq themselves. The other thing I think I really want to talk about is media coverage. Something David mentioned a little bit about where to go and get news and resources about what's going on in Iraq. And I agree, it's been one of the biggest problems in mobilizing people and getting them to go out and speak about the war. I mean, how many people were aware of the Winter Soldier hearings going on in D.C. this past weekend? That is incredible. We had over 200 Iraq War veterans, combat veterans, in one place. This is one of the largest gatherings of Iraq War vets outside of the U.S. military, speaking personally, on the record, about what they saw and did in Iraq. All of our testifiers were thoroughly documented. So reporters had an instant story. They could walk up to anyone, get their story, walk over to our verification team, and get such minute verification of what they saw and what they did. It would be unquestionable. Their resources would be impeccable on this. We got almost no American news coverage. Every single Arab language network was there and covering this event. BBC covered it. Various other international sources covered it. We had 2 Japanese crews there. And yet there was almost complete media blackout within the United States. We had a small story in the Washington Post, which the AP Newsline picked up. I personally called the AP Washington Bureau desk on Saturday morning to follow up with our press release. I was told simply they decided not to cover the story. A historic story. What could possibly be one of the most important stories about the war in Iraq? And AP News chose not to cover it. And I think this speaks volumes about the perception of groups like Iraq Veterans Against the War in the U.S. The news media is very happy to cover individual veterans. They're very happy to cover me. They're very happy to cover other veterans we have spread out around the country. Because we're individuals. What power does an individual have in making policy, in influence government? But a mass number, a critical mass, is something they don't want to talk about. They don't want to talk about hundreds of combat veterans speaking out against the war. Right now, I.V.A.W. has over 700 members spread out around the world. Not just veterans, but active duty, National Guard, and Reserve. We have 2 chapters on active duty bases in Fort Hood and Fort Drum. And yet this is not covered in the news because the news and those who are in charge realize the power of people, of a mass number. They want us isolated. They want us to act only as individuals, not as groups, because with groups we have power. And that's really what it comes down to. That's something that I know David and I will agree on completely, that it's mass numbers. It's these mass actions we take that really speak loudest. That's why I say, I'm going to go out and vote. I voted in the last presidential, I voted in the midterm elections, but you know where I was in February after the 2004 election? I was in D.C. protesting at Bush's second inauguration. And I think that's what we need to tell ourselves when we walk out of this door. Voting in elections and politics is great, it's important. It was Congress that ended the Vietnam War. And might I add you, they didn't end the Vietnam War by voting to end it, they cut off the funding. Which I think is a very important thing to remember every time one of these supplementals or one of these budget bills about the war come in front of Congress. And they say, well, we need to support the troops. Giving Bush more money to kill more Americans and more Iraqis is not supporting us. Bringing us home is supporting us. And once again, I think that's worth saying again, that no matter who we vote for, no matter who wins these next elections, the next day, every single one of us, if we're truly committed to ending this war, needs to say to ourselves now, election day I'll be in the ballot box, the next day I'll be in the streets. Thank you.